the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Abbott government will never do the right thing by Australian families. They simply just don't get it. We saw barely a month ago the second hockey Abbott budget containing all the old unfairness of the first budget, rebranded, rebadged, repackaged. It had a new paint job and a new slogan, but it can't hide the harm that this budget will do to millions of Australian families. This is one of the budgets which is best described as the further away you are, the better it looks, and the closer you get to it, the uglier it looks. John Howard had core and non-core promises, if we remember. He had core promises and non-core promises. The non-core promises are the ones, obviously, that he never wanted to keep. But Tony Abbott has now updated the core non-core promise falsity with the pre-election, post-election promises. Pre-election, all things to all people. Post-election, will you leave me alone? I'm just too busy putting the boot into you. Now, of course, he has broken pre-election promises, but what he's also started to do is now break his post-election promises. It is a lazy second budget because it passes the heavy lifting of reforming the Australian economy onto the states. We see $50 billion worth of cuts to hospitals. Families get sick, families need hospitals, and they are taking the money away from the states, and they are basically discharging their own responsibility to stand up for Australian families. But this $50 billion cut from hospitals, which Labor will articulate to every hospital in coming weeks and months, is matched by a $30 billion cut to schools. Now, what happens with the school cuts is they cut the opportunities for families as well. But their broken promises hurting families are not just $50 billion from hospitals, not just $30 billion from schools. There's 8.4 million Australians who are having their superannuation increases frozen, not once, not twice, but 3 times by this government. It is stomach-churning to listen to this government say they will never do anything adverse to superannuation. It is the epitome of the big lie. To get a lecture from people who've never fought to increase superannuation, never tried to improve people's conditions, they have simply frozen superannuation at 9.5%. At 9.5%. Every year this government is in power, every year they freeze the superannuation. They are damaging the retirement incomes of millions of Australians. And of course, not only have they broken their promises with their lazy budget, passing all the pain onto the states in hospitals and in schools, not only have they frozen the superannuation of 8.4 million Australians, but what is the mechanism that these unscrupulous operators in the government have adopted? They are using the Greens political party to implement their wishes. They are working with the Greens political party. And of course, though, I don't necessarily give all the blame to the government. The Greens political party, obviously so pleased that they could have a meeting with Tony Abbott, or maybe they didn't even get to meet with him. Maybe they just inflicted Eric Abetz and George Brandis, although that does defy logic that they could convince anyone. The Greens political party for extending the time in which people can write submissions to the taxation review by 6 weeks. They couldn't believe their luck. Someone was talking to the Greens and they were so grateful they said, "Where do we sign?" Now, we've seen, though, in their attack on family payments, the chaos of the hour before question time. That is an hour of the life of the nation we will never get back. Again, this government steals time from Australians with their own inadequate plans. We've offered to work with the government on some of the savings propositions, but this government said no to our shadow minister because the sort of Pavlovian response of the Minister for Social Security, so busy polishing his credentials for leadership, he can't even see someone smarter than him or deal with it. We offer a deal, and then today, what happened? Talking about smart, I wouldn't say anything, Minister Bass, but we see today the government comes up with this great idea. Let's separate. I'm sorry. Please come back. Please. I'm sorry. Thank you. They're precious over there, aren't they? So what happens today is that ScoMo comes back with a plan which our person suggested to him the other day. But of course, the real problem isn't their chaos. It is also their broken promises and their hurt. It's what the Prime Minister still says. I mean, there is one thing I admire about this Prime Minister. He sticks to his line no matter what is happening. No matter what is happening, and well, actually he doesn't, does he? I take that back. All right. What he said is, I was just thinking about paid parental leave there. We, the coalition government, are not going to repair our budget this year at the expense of your family budget. No, none other than T. Abbott, member for Warringah, leader of Her Majesty's government in Australia, said, we, the coalition government, are not going to repair our budget this year at the expense of your family budget. Well, that is a lie. That is a lie, and it is still a lie, and it remains a grievous lie. Now, of course, they're out there, this coalition government, claiming the budget is good news for family. Well, if they think this is good news, I hate to see what they think bad news is. NatSem analysis shows that nearly 1 in 2 Australian families, 1 in 2 Australian families will be worse off. Worse off. That's 1.4 million working families. We put it on the record and we challenge the government to contradict it with their own evidence, although this is a party who doesn't like windmills, so I don't know what evidence they'll ever rely upon. 1.4 million families. I'll tell you what NatSem says, Sunshine. 8 out of 10 families with children earning below $75,000 will lose out overall. I'll repeat that. 8 out of 10 families with children earning less than $75,000 will lose out overall. And understand, the verb I used there was earning. This is a government who likes to blame everyone on a pension as some sort of welfare cheat, but they would say they're the friends of the people who are earning. How can this be the case if 8 out of 10 families earning less than $75,000 lose out overall? This is a government, and before some of the masters and before some of the people in the government start protesting about these facts, let me tell you the people that we're describing: carers, teachers, police, firefighters, paramedics, social workers. So the message, our message, Labor's message to families, to Australian families is clear. Joe Hockey might think that you don't have good jobs, a good job being enough to buy a house in Sydney. Scott Morrison might choose to denigrate you. But what we can promise is that Labor will not denigrate the people who are working hard. We value what you do, and we think you deserve support for the extra costs of raising a child. Slashing family budgets for Australians already in work is not an incentive. It is not a plan for the future. It's punishment. It's betrayal of people doing their best to raise children, build communities, pay taxes, make their ends meet. Now, some of the families who are so affected, and the detail matters, families with newborns. What happens is that 90,000 women are having reduced support for parental leave changes that this government's now advocating. They will lose up to $11,500 that they would otherwise get, $11,500 for 90,000 Australian women because of this government's changes. 45,000 women will lose part of their paid parental leave, and 34,000 women will lose the entire $11,500. But it doesn't stop with families and toddlers. Sorry, families and newborns. There's families with toddlers. The government's childcare changes will push some families out of the childcare system altogether. Analysis by Good Start Early Learning shows as many as 100,000 children will be worse off. These are the numbers which Labor are concerned about. Families will be up to $4,600 a year worse off. Yet the government is willing to spend the equivalent of $22,000 a day advertising before parents see any change in their childcare subsidy from this government. And then, of course, there's families with children at school. A family with a single income of $65,000 will be $6,000 a year worse off by 2018-19. A single mum with an income of $55,000 and 2 children will be $6,000 a year worse off by 2018-19. The family with a dual income of $60,000 and 2 children will be nearly $4,000 a year worse off. What I promise the families of Australia is you will not be the forgotten families of Australia under a Labor government. We will make families an issue. We will demonstrate to this government, and we will carry the message every day between now and the government, now and the election, that the Australian people know an out-of-touch government when they see it. they don't like to be patronised, they don't like to be lied to, and they certainly don't like the attacks on families of this government.
Question is